Welcome back. The prayer of St. Francis begins with these words, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace," which begs the question, what does it look like to be an instrument of God's peace in the world? Fortunately, the author of the prayer gives us several scenarios in which we can spread God's peace. Today we are looking at the line, "Where there is sadness, let me sow joy." The original French version of the prayer says, "Where there is sadness, let me put joy," or replace it with joy. I think there are two ways to interpret this line. One is unhealthy, the other is healthy. Sadness is a complex thing. We can be sad for all kinds of reasons, and sometimes we allow things like disappointment to morph into sadness. For instance, it's disappointing when our team loses the game. But when we allow disappointment to become our disposition, that's when it turns into sadness. And that is a completely different thing than the person who is sad because they lost a loved one, or a pet, or a job, or a measure of health, or the myriad of other losses that we have in our lifetimes. Sometimes sadness needs to be felt and worked through. In his poem, "Servant of Servants," Robert Frost writes, "The only way out is through." My professor of pastoral care in seminary used to say, sometimes you gotta feel it to heal it. There are folks who are uncomfortable with being around those who are sad, and that's okay. Sometimes being around someone who is sad brings up some unresolved sadness in our own lives. So some folks try to alleviate their own discomfort through trying to make the sad person laugh, let's say. That may work for a moment, and perhaps it gets the person's mind off their sadness. But at the end of the day, it doesn't often help the sad person to work through and process their thoughts and emotions. In some cultures, people who wish to come alongside of the person who is sad simply sit in silence with the individual. In those cultures, it is not seen as an uncomfortable intrusion, but it is indeed welcome. The presence of the person is seen as a message of love and support and comfort. The silence is a message that says, I have no idea what you're going through, but I love you and I am with you on this journey. In clergy circles, we call this the ministry of presence. And believe me, many times the ministry of presence is what people want more than well-intentioned but trite platitudes. I was honored to co-officiate at the funeral of the mother of a dear friend of mine who is also a colleague. I did all of the things that a pastor and a close friend should do. And when it was over, my friend came up to me and said that the most helpful words that anyone had said to her during the visitation or the funeral was not something I said, if you can believe that. It was something her best friend said. She came up to my friend during the visitation and said, "This sucks." St. Paul, in his second letter to the church at Corinth, writes that we can offer consolation and comfort to people who are in despair because we have experienced God's consolation and comfort. Indeed, Paul writes that it's God's consolation and comfort that we pass along to others. Nobody asked me to rewrite this line of the prayer, but if they did, I would change the line to read, "Where there is sadness, let me offer comfort." Don't get me wrong, I want to spread joy, and perhaps somewhere down the road, joy will be the outcome of the comfort I offer. But sometimes, many times, we need to be able to express and address the sadness before we can get to the joy. In a society that is uncomfortable with sadness, will you be the exception? Will you come alongside of the person who is sad, not with a joke or a platitude, but with the ministry of presence and the truthful words, "This sucks"? In the meantime, I'll try to find a way to say the same thing in a more spiritual way.